living condition, a tent, perhaps propane tanks there as well. And if you're trying to figure out exactly where this is, if you live in the valley, it's right near the 405 and the 101, kind of near Van Nuys, near Sherman Oaks, near Tarzana and Encino. Quite often, a lot of folks like to go to Balboa Park and ride their bikes. So this is kind of that area. It's the brushy area near Balboa Park where it's a lot of open space. So with our recent situation when it comes to the homeless, a lot of them have found a way to migrate to this open space and use that, and it's become basically a homeless community. Perhaps that's what started this fire. We won't know that for quite some time, but this fire is really moving in this very thick brush. So it's got vegetation that it can feed off, but it also has the humans living there and whatever the refuge that they have brought with them and put in this situation. And this fire happens to be burning right where the thickest part of the trees are. So the fire department, they are on the ground. They're also in the air. But right now, this fire is out of control.
It absolutely is out of control. You can see the big black plumes of smoke sort of enveloping the sky above it. And also talking about what it's feeding on, the heat. The heat is truly not making matters any easier for firefighters trying to battle this fire. We do know that LA City Fire, they are very aware that the homeless are here. They're trying to check to see if there are any victims. They're trying to evacuate any of the victims who may be sort of trapped in this area, trying to figure out where to go. So that is adding somewhat of an insult to injury out here while they try to fight this fire right here. They're also trying to make sure that no one is injured and trying to get them out of danger as well.
This is really moving, Colleen,
yeah,
because there's so much brush out there. But also look at the level of the smoke. It's basically going horizontal. So we do see that there is some wind activity, which is always a problem when it comes to fighting these fires. The higher the wind, the harder it is to fight these fires. And right now, this thing is really moving because of all the fuel.
Yeah, let's talk about exactly what's happening with the firefight. Let's go to Brian Humphrey with the LA City Fire Department. Mr. Humphrey, thank you so much for joining us. This is a very hard-fought battle that's being fought right now by LA firefighters.
Well, Colleen, today more than 100 Los Angeles firefighters, and including the two helicopters you've just seen here in the shot, are making an aggressive attack on a blaze of a little more than 5 acres. And those just joining us here, this blaze near Balboa Boulevard and Victory Boulevard in the northern part of the Sepulveda Basin Recreation Area. As you mentioned, there are homeless encampments in the area, but we're pleased to report that there have been no injuries. The firefight continues with this wind pushing the fire slowly to the west, but thankfully no structures are involved and no formal evacuations have been ordered.
Brian, have they been able to get all the homeless out of there?
We're still searching for the homeless, David, at this point in time, both by air and by ground. And, of course, it taxes our resources as we do that. The resources should be fighting the fire, and that's our focus right now. But if we encounter someone, we guide them to safety, but no reports of any specific people trapped at this time. Yeah. It's important for us to mention, David and Colleen, that today is a day of low wildfire danger in the city of Los Angeles. And when we see the brush in a low fire danger day being this volatile, it reminds us that we have many difficult days ahead.
Oh, no doubt about that, Brian. Kind of talking about a little difficulty out here, we were getting reports that propane tanks were exploding. No word on any part of those causing any extra. I don't know if that's where all this massive black plumes are coming, or what would be housing propane tanks out there.
Well, Colleen, the homeless population relies on propane oftentimes to heat when it's cold and certainly to cook food and the like. So these propane explosions have been isolated to roughly small, we believe roughly 25-gallon tanks. And at this point in time, we're pleased to report there have been no injuries, but things could certainly change as we encounter more hazards that.
I think it's interesting that you talk about the low wildfire danger, because you could see the large amount of brush with this fire, so it's really feeding it. As we get into really the wildfire season, and we've coming off a record-breaking year when it comes to rainfall, and I imagine that this is a great illustration of the dangers that we're going to be facing going forward.
We live in a crucible of fire here in Southern California, and if you live in California, you have to be ready for wildfire at this time. We've been working with the Channel 7 newsroom, and we ask your listeners and viewers to certainly talk with their family, explain the hazards in their communities, and be ready to act or help their friends and family should a wildfire occur.
No doubt about that. And speaking of, we're seeing the water dropping helicopters. Are you trying to get any more air attack, or is this you have 100 firefighters working this from the ground as well? You think you're going to be able to get a handle on this?
Well, despite being in the city of Los Angeles, we do have mutual aid response. The LA County Fire Department is sending their helicopter 16, as well as a hand crew to assist us. That helicopter will work the two red and white LAFD helicopters you see to drop water in the fire. We feel this is an adequate air response at this time. The bulk of the work will be handled by firefighters on the ground.
Brian, I want to wish you luck on this firefight. Thank you so much for your help on this. We're learning a lot from you, and we will continue to watch this firefight. We'll check back with you if it continues on, but thanks so much for your information.
Well, sir, good day.
All right, and then let's, we have a couple of points we want to make real quickly that are very important. One is the Metro Orange Line busway in both directions between White Oak Avenue and Woodley Avenue have been shut down right now as the LA Fire Department continues to fight this fire. For safety reasons, they're having to shut down the Orange Line. So if that is your way of getting around, check with them to make sure that you're going to be able to use that. Also, we did want to bring in Dallas Rains because we have been watching the conditions out there. Brian says it is low wildfire danger, but you can't deny the fact that the winds are moving out there, and that could still be a problem. Dallas, what are you getting when it comes to the weather?
That's right, David. This is a typical afternoon in Southern California in that area. So we have southwest and westerly winds blowing about 5 to 15 miles per hour. Humidity are fairly nice. I mean, we don't have any super dry conditions. There are no red flag alerts. But as you mentioned, David, anytime the wind is blowing and a fire is started and you've got plenty of vegetation to burn, I mean, you've got a problem. And so, but as far as the fire weather goes, it's about not perfect, but it's very good for the firefighters. I think they will be able to adjust to those westerly winds blowing at about 15 miles per hour, David. And Colleen, and also relative humidity is now running in the 30% range out there, 25-30%. So again, the air is fairly moist for Southern California. The winds are not super strong, and but it is a combination of ignition of a fire and, of course, the fact that you do have, as you mentioned earlier, David, you have a lot of vegetation out there after this year's rain. So we have a lot of vegetation to burn.
Yeah, and you're seeing the helicopters trying to make their water drops. It's got to be very hard to pinpoint where's the best location to drop water in order to stop the forward progression of this fire. But, I mean, we keep watching them. They do a great job every time.
Oh, they're experts at it. The interesting thing that makes this very complicated is down there somewhere are a number of homeless tents, encampment that we believe that folks may be spread out. As Brian said, no reports of any injuries just yet. Hopefully everybody did get out. There's some folks that are kind of hanging out watching the fire fight. But that does pose extra problems for firefighters. So there's somebody who seems to be urgently running around there trying to figure things out. Perhaps he lives in one of these homeless encampments, or at least is looking around. But it is of some concern to know that there were humans living down there in those conditions, and that these flames are really moving right now.
No doubt about it, David. And you know, you see those people. Those are a lot of all their items that they own. So of course they're trying to get to those, you know, their belongings. And we do know we've been covering it for now months, the homelessness issue and crisis in Los Angeles. So again, you know, our hearts go out to people who are losing their belongings. But as of right now, we know that nobody has been injured. They are trying to check to see if they need to evacuate any more of the homeless who are in this area. And we know that no structures were being threatened. So as we watch this fire, and you can see the hand crews right there trying to get a good handle on it, we know there's about 100 firefighters on the scene right now that are on the ground.
Right. So that's comforting to know that there are people on the ground, but that shows you also a perspective of how large these flames are right now. A tremendous amount of brush and fuel, and so these flames are really moving. These ground crews are doing what they can, trying to get this fire under control, but also Also, there are 2 helicopters that are assisting them from the air. And according to Brian Humphreys, we're getting another helicopter from LA County that should be on its way, as well as another ground crew. So they're taking this very seriously. But right now, with all this fuel, it's going to be a tough fight.
It certainly is. And every time we watch these, as we go into it is low fire season, a low fire day. And of course, we get this brush fire. So it just shows every day it's sort of everybody's on a heightened sense of alert for any kind of fire. And we do know that, if you're looking at, you can see it's near Balboa Boulevard and Victory Boulevard. We know Victory Boulevard is still open. So that, as we know, we're heading into the extreme traffic time. But we know that it is open there. Obviously, if that changes, we certainly will let you know. But as of right now, there hasn't been any kind of massive closures of any of the roads. We do know that the temporary closure of the Metro Orange Line busway in both directions between White Oak Avenue and Woodley Avenue, their operations are sort of stopping for a little while.
Mm-hmm. So as we continue to watch this progress of this fire, which has only been burning for a few minutes now. This is going on in the Sepulveda Basin. So if you're going to be on the 101 or the 405, be prepared for some slowdowns there as well, because this is quite visible throughout a large part of Southern California, right there near Balboa Park, the 101 or the 405, and kind of near the Encino area, Sherman Oaks, Van Nuys. So there might be some folks slowing down. And look at the large amount of smoke. Some of that smoke may be carrying into not only neighborhoods, but some of the freeways nearby.
No kidding. And of course, on a day like this where it's hot, a lot of people are opening their windows. But if you do have a compromised immune system, you may want to close up your windows so you don't have all this smoke and fumes heading inside. But as of right now, David, it's always amazing when you see a major news story starting to break out in a certain area and you see that the roads are pretty, they've looked pretty light, but maybe they're closing down. You can see police right there. Maybe they are closing down a stretch right there. Yeah,
we'll try to figure out where that is exactly, but that looks like it's that road that sits right outside of Balboa Park. But we'll try to get some confirmation on what that is. But that does appear to be shut down. I saw some traffic being rerouted there as well. Another road right there. So we'll try to get some identification on what these roads are. But if you are familiar with the basin there, then you want to avoid this area because there's going to be some serious slowdowns there. Okay. Burbank Boulevard, east and west. Burbank Boulevard, which is a major thoroughfare, east and west, is shut down now. So, yeah, I would often go to this park using Burbank Boulevard.
Exactly.
It goes over the freeway.
Right.
And okay, closed from Balboa to the 405. From Balboa to the 405, Burbank Boulevard is shut down. So, yeah, that was a major way that I could get to this park and ride my bike. And so that is what is shut down right now, about Burbank Boulevard, closed from Balboa to the 405.
So it's going to be tricky if you do have to make it around this area. But again, a lot of people are seeing the smoke and trying to figure out where exactly it's coming from. And again, it's coming from that Sepulveda Basin.
This is interesting, Colleen, because you could see the hot spots that are spread out all over the place. So there's a lot of ground to cover. We're getting reports now that the fire department is calling for even more resources as they get this fire under control. And let this be a lesson to all of us that brush clearance is vitally important. This is an area that's clearly overgrown, and even though it's green and humidity is higher than normal and the winds are light, because of the amount of fuel, this fire is a tough one to fight, and it's moving right now uncontrollably. They will get it under control, but it's moving quite quickly. And if you don't do the brush clearance around your home, keep this site in mind as you see that these flames, if they have fuel, they're going to keep going, and it's tough to stop them.
I know, and Dallas is saying, we first heard from Brian Humphrey, the LA City Fire Department, saying the winds are pushing it, and we heard Dallas saying that they're 5 to 15 miles per hour, so it's not an especially windy afternoon, but just a little bit. You see right there on the top part of your screen from Air 7 HD capturing what looks like a hot spot that's not kind of blowing up right before our eyes.
If you're just tuning in, see that it is now engulfed in smoke, but that was a tent right there. This is basically a tent city. Homeless folks have found their way into the basin there, and they've been living there. And part of the complication here is the fact that there are tents and homes basically spread out throughout this brush where folks have been living. Perhaps that is what caused this fire. We won't know for quite some time. But due to that, some of those folks, as we heard from Brian, had propane tanks, probably for cooking purposes and stuff like that. And these tanks are now exploding in these flames, which is another problem that they're having to deal with.
It just goes to show, though, when I was asking about the propane tanks, we take it for granted. A lot of people, you do have a home and you do use it for, you know, your barbecues and what have you. So he said that they were those small, sort of those small propane tanks that were used for cooking or keeping warm. So again, as we watch this brush fire moving through the area, you can see the tremendous amount of dark smoke that is billowing and blanketing this area. And we know that a lot of people are obviously seeing this from the hills, and you can, you know, you're obviously looking at it from Encino and Van Nuys and Sherman Oaks, probably Studio City. You can really get a good look at this.
I'm getting another report here, Colleen, that the fire department is saying that water supply is an issue. So they're asking for more water. So there may not be a lot of hookups. They might have to bring their own water into this situation because it is kind of moved out into this more of a countryside area. So they're having to bring in some water. They're going through it very quickly. And you can see how spread out this fire is due to those winds. Even though they're only 5 to 15, it's enough to keep these embers from moving and starting spot fires. It's spread out quite a bit. So there you see some hot spots there, and over where that crew is, I saw the helicopter was flying around putting out some hot spots as well. So they're watching this, but it's moving pretty well. And with all this, these trees, you notice that it's really isolated to those taller, thicker trees. That's where it's really kind of moving, as opposed to the lower grassy area, which they could probably get a handle on quite quickly. But it's those trees providing that fuel that makes it tough.
Well, remember, David, we had a really wet winter, and we had a lot of rain and a lot of grass, a lot of vegetation were thriving. So of course that means more fuel for these fires as they kind of move through the area during fire season. But you can see it right there. You see all that dry brush on the ground, and the road is right. There's two roads that are sort of boxing this sort of in, so hopefully it can't really jump any of these roads. Hopefully they can confine it to this area, but you see some white smoke, so that is a little promising now. Yeah,
that's a good sign. Dallas Raines has been watching this with us as he, of course, has been monitoring the weather situation. Luckily, Dallas, you said the temperatures are pretty good today.
They are. It's 87 degrees right now out there in the area, and the winds are gusting, but it's a typical afternoon breeze that blows through that part of the valley, Colleen. 5 to 15 miles per hour, occasionally a little higher gust. But I think what you're seeing is that there's so much, you know, there are old weeds and things that have grasses that have grown up that we normally don't have because of our extensive precipitation this winter. You're dealing with that. And of course, this is the peak time for winds in that area. About 6, 7 o'clock tonight, these winds will back down considerably between about 4, 5, 10 miles per hour. But right now, during the peak afternoon heating hours, you'll get the strongest winds blowing through. There are no red flag alerts or anything like that. I do. When you see this, though, you have to really be concerned about the coming season.
No kidding.
When Santa Ana winds will blow with great velocity. They'll grow with 35, 45, 60 mile per hour winds. And if fires are started, it's almost impossible to stop them once those red flag warnings get going.
Yeah, and the scary thing is this year we're going to be dealing with more fuel than a normal year.
That's right.
So if we add those really intense winds with extra fuel, then we have a real problem.
Right, exactly. And I think they're going to be working with the National Weather Service this year. Some areas that will be in canyons, the possibility of power will be turned off and reduced if wind velocities approach a certain criteria. Probably going to be in that area. I haven't seen everything. They're still working that out. But wind velocities of 60 mile per hour gusts are probably going to be the criteria. And once that happens in the canyons, I would imagine that the power will be turned off during red flag warnings, and also would be an excellent, we've talked about this before, it'd be great to keep people out of the canyons during red flags because very dangerous. It doesn't take very much to start a fire.
That homeless encampment, there's a great shot of one right there, and that shows you that this is an area that is basically lived in by quite a few people in Dallas, Colleen. This probably bears some conversation, but we can't deny the fact that our homeless problem has exploded. And so homeless people are finding areas to live, quite often in areas like this, maybe other areas around brush, trees, etc., maybe a little bit isolated. If they start fires, like Dallas, you always say, we have such a huge percentage of our fires that are human caused.
Yes, it's about 99% of fires in Southern California are started by humans. That doesn't mean they're arson.
Yeah.
But people either make mistakes, they're doing things, welding during Santa Ana winds, making campfires during Santa Ana winds. Things like that have, over the years, I've seen many fires that are produced because most of the fires, interesting enough, in the western U.S. are caused by lightning. But Southern California, we don't have that problem. So it's over 99% of the fires in Southern California are started by humans. So again, that's one reason I've always thought it'd be a good idea to close down the canyons during Santa Ana wind events, red flag warnings, just to, you know, keep people out of the canyons and usually they're very short-lived. Those red flag alerts are normally 36, 48 hours at the most. Then you can go right back up in the canyons and hike.
We're showing people an extra problem there, Dallas. That road there, which often works as a fire break, it did not work. So the fire has now jumped the road to another area.
Yeah, we certainly didn't want to see that. I'm sure firefighters absolutely don't want to see that. But we are seeing a lot of clear. You can see the areas below. You can see some of the hot spots, but they are making very quick work. We know this call came in around 3:45 that this brush fire started in the Sepulveda Basin, and they are making very quick work, just over 35 minutes now.
It's looking a lot better.
And think about it, David, Colleen, folks at home, and this is not in red flag conditions. And you see how difficult it is to fight it.
This is a tough fight.
Firefighters are doing a great job, but you can imagine if we have 50, 60 mile an hour winds with fuel coming up in the fall.
I know that is something that nobody really wants to think about because
it's a reality.
It is a reality, and it's just so scary as so many people are still trying to rebuild their lives from last year's fire season.
Yeah, this is frightening kind of going forward on this year. So we all have to be vigilant, and we have to do our part in making sure that we are fire prepared. There is some flames right there, right by that homeless encampment. It looks like something really went up just a second ago. But these are the areas that they're pointing out that do have propane tanks spread out. So it's very dangerous for folks who are nearby, especially the firefighters. Hopefully the folks in this homeless encampment were able to get out of there. But firefighters are fighting these flames, doing the best they can. This is one of those hot spots. But it's situated right around all these items that have been brought in by the community and that are living there right now, and it's adding to the fire.
Yeah, and you see it, David. It's got to be hard because they don't exactly know if something could possibly, those propane tanks. You don't know what's inside there. You don't know how hard it is to get some of this stuff.
And another thing, too, is anytime you have materials like that that are burning, there's a toxic chemicals can be released into the air, which can affect people downwind from that. Because we don't know exactly what's burning there, but generally any kind of plastics or anything like that can be very toxic.
Right. It looks like they're trying to get this fire contained here. We're getting reports that they're also considering bringing in bulldozers to take care of the edges of this fire, keep it contained to a specific area. That's a hot spot, but it does look better in some of the other areas. And plus, a lot of the trees that were feeding this fire are burned right now. So that fuel has disappeared as they continue to get control of this fire. It did jump that road, but it looks like they're very aware of that, and they're trying to get that part under control. And it doesn't quite have the fuel over there that it does here. So this is interesting, though. So what you see there is just this fragment of all the homeless tents that have been built up within all of these trees. Many of them have now burned up. So it'll be interesting to see as we eventually are able to evaluate what was in there at that time. I bet you there will be dozens of people's homes.
Oh, I agree with you, David. But you know what's amazing, David, is to see the firefighter. He's been putting so much water on this fire, and it looks like it's really not making much of a dent. So
stubborn.
It's very stubborn. It needs to burn itself out in some of this area. You can see that lot of fire. Yeah, right, Dallas, you're talking about it's a lot of the materials.
The materials, really hard to put that out.
But you see the hot spots as we kind of show you around the area. There are a number of hot spots, but you could see The firefighters are slowly getting control. This ground crew putting out this hotspot here, and then already some of them moving on to the next one. But those edges there, you see they have to stop the fire. There's another hotspot there, but I'm sure they're aware of that. And you could see where there were trees, those trees are gone. So the fuel is gone. So the fire is now, they're able to contain it a little bit better because a lot of the fuel that was feeding this fire has been consumed.
Yeah, David, and let's talk about there's been a couple updated on street closures here. We see Victory, Oxnard, White Oak, and Balboa. They're the streets around this fire. They actually are now closed in conjunction with the LAPD sort of doing this. So we know that there are a few areas. We know Burbank Boulevard, east and west, closed from Balboa to the 405. We also know certain areas of Victory, Oxnard, White Oak, and Balboa. We know that if they're near this fire, the Sepulveda Basin, near Balboa Park, they're also being closed, and traffic is being diverted because of this fire. So it's going to cause a big tie-up as we hit the commute time.
Getting close to 4:30 right now, and things are really going to be building when it comes to traffic. So just be aware that there are going to be some problems if you're heading through this part of Southern California, because this is affecting probably a couple of freeways as well as surface streets that are very, very popular. And as we, there we go. We're going to, there's the LA River over there to the left-hand side, but there's a traffic building on the streets. And I imagine this getting down, let's say Burbank Boulevard around the 405, that whole area is already a mess. To shut down Burbank Boulevard and kind of divert traffic to some of the other surface streets or the freeway, that's going to add to, let's say, the traditional bad traffic on the 405 or the 101. They're all going to exponentially be made worse, which is not a good thing.
They are. And, you know, this is one of those areas where, of course, you're seeing a fire now. But when we have wet weather, this is also the area that gets flooded and has so much standing water. So it is just, look at all that brush that it has. It could, that hot spot right there on your top right screen, it has so much more fuel to go through if it keeps moving.
But they're on it. That's the ground crew is doing some good work. And as we said, water was an issue or is an issue when it comes to fighting this fire. So they're trying to bring in more, but they're going through it really quickly. And then there, I wonder if that is that same area that's dumping out all that black smoke. Is that fire? That's that firefight we have been watching where there seems to be a tremendous amount of fuel, not natural fuel, but brought in by this homeless encampment that had almost a junkyard-like look to it. And all that fuel is what's being consumed right now by the fire.
And there's other little areas of tents as well. So as we kind of take a wider look at this area, we do know that I'm sure as some of the homeless people were evacuated, some areas still were fine. But of course, as we're watching it, we see the hot spots on the left-hand side as Air 7 HD is panning over. The fire is jumping, and we know Dallas was saying, oh, there's the other area where we saw a gentleman running back and forth. So doesn't look that fire is going to get too close to there, but I don't know if these are people who live in this area, if these are law enforcement trying to fan out and make sure everybody's okay and get them out of this area just as a precaution.
Well, this that homeless encampment, which is just what looks like a couple of 100 yards away from where this fire is, I'm sure there was concern for them, but it doesn't look like the wind is going in that direction, so they seem to be pretty safe. This helicopter, they're hitting that hot spot there that jumped the road. They're taking care of that. That's good. So they don't want this fire to spread. So they're slowly getting it under control. Oh, yeah, look at it.
Yeah, palm tree right there.
The palm trees. And there's also a ground crew putting that out as well. But you can see halfway up in that palm tree, that is literally on fire.
And they're everywhere. We know there's over probably 100 firefighters now on the scene trying to battle this fire. They really are doing some quick work. But it's once they get one hot spot out, it looks like another one flares up, or they have a massive.
That's that area that they have been hitting with a lot of water. I wonder if they've just given up on it and say it's going to have to just burn itself out because the fuel will run out eventually, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Oh no, they're still hitting it with some water right there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you see the plastic chairs and bowls and sort of makeshift kitchen areas and. Again, there is a lot of plastic, a lot of flammable items here, and you know the tarps. This really is a tough spot for firefighters to get this fire out.
Well, that is awful. And then, as Dallas said, there could be a lot of toxic smoke that is blowing up off of that pile that is now on fire right now, and they've been hitting that for quite some time.
Yeah, it's hard to get it out, isn't it? And also, if you notice when we were zoomed out a little bit there on our 7, some of that toxic now moving across the road into homes. You can see right across the street there's a couple of homes with swimming pools and things like that, and that's a lot of toxic air to deal with.
But this is part of the issue when it comes to these homeless encampments, and we don't know yet how this fire started, but let's assume that maybe it is because of the humans, whatever they're doing inside of there, that may have caused this fire. I mean, that's part of the danger that we're dealing with having people kind of spread out in these areas. And then if something like this happens, then a lot of people are in danger. As in the old days, when nobody was living there, you were fairly confident all you had to do was fight the fire. But now there are so many more complications when it comes to human involvement down there.
Yeah. We're also getting some updated information about this. We're learning that about 100 homeless people have been displaced from this area, and they are in contact with homeless services. So we know homeless services, they're setting up a plan for the homeless in the area. They're not going to be able to go back per the fire department. So again, we do know a lot of people have been displaced because of this fire.
Right, so 100 more homeless people. And we have been really concentrating on the homeless issue here in Southern California, trying to give you all these different angles. And what we have learned is that there just aren't enough places for the vast majority of homeless in Southern California. There's not anywhere for them to go. So that's why they are ending up in places like this. And here we are, this place where they have found and kind of settled in. So about 100 people now, we have to find a place for them. I'm not sure where that's going to be, but at least authorities are helping them.
Yeah, and you can see we have a map up on the right-hand side with the live Mega Doppler 7000 HD. But you can see the areas that are really getting to see this area, and we're seeing where the smoke is going. But we see Encino and Sherman Oaks, Lake Balboa, Reseda, Tarzana. In Dallas, you're talking about some of that sort of toxic smoke possibly blowing into homes.
That's right.
You were saying that the direction of the fire, the winds are obviously going to be taking those.
Yeah, that's right. From the southwest, westerly toward an northeasterly direction. Also, you might notice there, too, there was some type of vehicle. There were several explosions from that vehicle a few minutes ago. You can see every once in a while.
Yeah, you're seeing.
But as you look across the street there, you can see there are homes and businesses right there. And
so when we see these kinds of fires, Dallas, then it's not over when the flames go away. And that's why they're kind of asking, we're getting reports that 3 more hand crews are being requested from LA County to come help out the LA Fire Department, because what they're going to have to do is kind of go through this area. These hot spots can flare up. We've seen wildfires pick up again days later because the hot spots are still out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there will be hot spots here, so they need those ground crews to come in there and kind of get through there and make sure that this doesn't kick up again, especially when folks aren't prepared. And keep in mind, there are other homeless people living nearby that could be in danger as well. I don't know if they're going to be evacuated or if they're going to let them be, but the danger won't be over when the flames go away.
Absolutely not. And you got a pretty good advantage of seeing how much fuel has burned in this area.
This looks like where it was started. Looks like a starting ignition point somewhere right there in the
Could have been.
left corner.
Could have been, especially you could see the direction the wind is going due to the
that
smoke.
field. Right, so it's right down in there as you zoom.
Yeah, right there in
Probably in that general area right in there is where it was started.
Interesting. Yeah, that may have been a point, but we're going to find out because the fire department, of course, they investigate these things and they need to get to the bottom of them. And perhaps this is another thing to consider: is if this was in fact started by someone in this homeless community, and especially confirmation from Brian Humphrey that they have propane tanks, they're cooking in all that brush with propane. That's really dangerous as we go into the fire danger season. With the winds kicking up and extremely dry brush. The brush is not dry right now, Dallas.
No, it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's dry, but considering what it's going to be in September and October, it'll be a lot drier.
Yeah. So if folks are there cooking with propane in the middle of a brushy, area, that's extremely dangerous.
Yes, very much so.
So we have been watching this. There are other homeless folks living in that area. We don't know if they're going to be required to move because this area will be dangerous for quite some time. But you have to have a place to put them. And so that, in a nutshell, has been one of the bigger parts of this homeless problem that we have been dealing with in Southern California. You'll talk to authorities, and they just won't have enough roofs for all the people who are homeless in Southern California, pushing towards 60,000 people. So we see a few hundred here in this Sepulveda Basin that are in danger of this fire, but that's only a few hundred. Think about the thousands that are spread out, the tens of thousands that are spread out throughout Southern California, and just Los Angeles. That poses some major complications and some major problems.
Oh, it does, David. And remember, I think a lot of us remember the Skirball fire in December. Remember, that was fire started by some homeless cooking, and that one really blew through, and we saw those dramatic images on the 405.
Right.
So again, this is certainly a problem. A lot of homeowners who are living near places where homeless encampments are.
Well,
this is certainly a cause for concern as well.
Last week, do you remember people lost their homes because there was a homeless encampment a few feet from their house, and a fire started at the encampment, and it rolled through their home, and they were heartbroken, and we all felt for them. It's a problem that so many people are running into. With that said, we have to be clear that we don't know what caused this fire.
Correct. We don't know what started this fire. We do see this is an area where we know that the homeless have been able to take shelter. We see a lot of, you're looking right there at the burned out cars. Dallas was just talking about seeing some vehicles starting to explode, small explosions happening from some of the vehicles. So
is that a cooking setup right there? Is that a barbecue?
That looks like a barbecue.
Yeah, so that might be part of the issue, is that barbecue probably has propane attached to it, or may have had propane attached to it at one time. So I'm not saying that these people are the dangerous ones. I'm just saying that with those elements out there, there's that vehicle's exploding.
Right there.
Yeah, throwing out some flames, and that's part of the problem, is there's so many combustibles out there. So we have a statement from Councilmember Nuri Martinez to please avoid this area, talking to the Lake Balboa residents. Please avoid the area until the fire has been controlled. Residents who are in the path of smoke are being advised to stay indoors and close all windows to prevent smoke inhalation. So some smart words there as this community tries to deal with this fire. It is so much better now than it was just a little while ago, but this danger is still there. And as we have been talking, some of the smoke could be toxic due to the substances that might be there in this basin that have been burning.
Yeah, David, and it has been a very stubborn firefight, because if firefighters are just battling the brush, which is already tough enough to get a handle over, that's one thing. But trying to get some of these unknown materials that have caught fire in vehicles and plastics that are really spewing out a lot of black smoke, it's a very tough fight for these firefighters.
So this looks like somebody's video that we may have been able to get. Excuse me. Not sure the source of this just yet, but we're going to show you what we've been able to gather. Folks on the ground watching the early stages of the fire, and also, more importantly, showing this giant plume of smoke, especially early on, Colleen, when we first jumped on this fire. That smoke was really gushing out of this area, and it was very black and thick.
It really was, and really a contrast to the blue skies above. I know we're all dealing with this heat wave, but we do always appreciate when people get video and they're safe enough to get the video and capture it and then post it with the hashtag ABC7 Eyewitness, because we do always say they're sort of on the ground journalists. We're all trying to give people an understanding of what's happening in their neighborhood, and this certainly gives us a good vantage point to see what people are witnessing. And this is somewhat of a good sign too, David, because we've been seeing the firefighters trying to put these fires out in these pockets of where obviously some homeless encampments were located, and they've been very challenging for the firefighters. But this one looks like it's almost out. We've been watching this fire.
That looks like the area that was really stubborn and
yeah.
burning super hot and putting out a tremendous amount of smoke. I think all the fuel is basically burned up there. There it is. That's still extremely hot there, but most of the fuel is gone. But you see the junk down there. You see all the debris down there, and that's part of the danger of this fire, is not only dealing with a tremendous amount of brush and the trees, but then also these elements here that are also burning. And they don't just go out like wood and leaves and the fire burns and moves on. It stays, and the flames are giant, and they continue to pose a threat to the outlying area.
Right, and smolders, and again, you know, causing some air quality issues as well. A lot of people, I'm sure, are now heeding the warnings to close their windows to make sure that they're not inhaling any part of these bad particles that are in the air.
We're starting to get a good grasp as you look through the debris. This is the area that has been burned, and you could see elements of the homeless population that was living there. You see what has been left behind, but how prevalent they were throughout this area. It was quite thick with not only trees, but also with a number of different tents and tent communities. In each one of these tents, they had furniture, they had some had vehicles, as we pointed out. There's a stove that looks like that's right in the middle of that. You see that? That looks like somebody brought some sort of a stove sitting right out there, which there's propane tanks. I think that might be a couple of propane tanks.
Those white ones right there on the top.
Those white ones right there.
Yeah, they do look like propane tanks.
Yeah. So this is part of the danger that Brian Humphrey was talking about, is these tanks are kind of spread out throughout this area. And this homeless community, they try to make it as comfortable for them as possible. So they bring these tanks out, they barbecue, they cook right outside of there. But now that you've seen all the brush that's out there, that shows you some of the dangers. A couple of shopping carts right there. But it does show you how prevalent they were, how thick they were when it comes to living in this area. And it was probably an area that they had access to, that they can get comfortable in. They didn't bother a lot of people there, more shopping carts. But they were able to kind of find their way into and create this community and not bother anybody. But then this fire breaks out, and then, of course, their world is turned upside down. It becomes a very dangerous place. I
know we are talking about the homeless, and we're learning that the mayor's office is sending a representative to assist with the displaced homeless. So again, Mayor Garcetti's office, they're sending a representative to assist with the homeless who have been taken away from this area. They are headed to the Balboa Recreation Center on Balboa near Burbank. So
this is a twofold kind of story. The story started with a fire that turned out to be quite dangerous and moving quite quickly, but it's kind of shifting more to this homeless situation that we have all been dealing with here in Southern California in a tremendous way. One of the worst problems in all of the United States, with tens of thousands of people homeless. So they find this place to live. I wouldn't say safely live, but to live. And then this fire breaks out and it rolls through. So there are a number of people that were living here in the early stages. We'll try to turn some video for you a little bit later on, but in the early stages when Air 7 first got there, before the fire really started moving, you could see a tremendous amount of tents, dozens of tents that were set up. So you could tell there were a number of people that were living within this brushy area. And this fire moved so quickly that they were going to lose everything, and they quite obviously they did. But you see also the debris and the refuse there that is left over there, and some of that is what made this fire so stubborn.
Yeah, it is a little heartbreaking, though. You feel for people who lose any of their belongings, and obviously they certainly are probably not wanting to live in this situation. And I mean, it's just the way it is right now in Los Angeles. We do know that it's very hard to afford living, and people are finding these homeless, these tent cities, and it's their community, and we'll see what happens with them. We know at least 100 homeless people have been displaced from this area. We know that they will be getting some help. Exactly where they're going to stay, there's not a lot of shelters right now. But I know that the city is certainly trying to come up with solutions as well.
It's a tough one.
It is.
We really need to, there's so many things that need to be answered, like what is causing it besides the high rent? Could it be drug addiction? Could it be
mental health?
Just a combination of things. I'm curious to see how long some of these people have been living in this community, because statistically, it shows that a lot of people, that thousands every month go homeless. I think the stat that I read was 5,000 a month, 5,000 more people a month become homeless here in Southern California. A number of those will eventually find a home within a month, but a couple of thousand will not, and will be added to the number of homeless. I'm wondering if these people are newly homeless or they have been living there for quite some time. A lot of questions to be answered. There's a lot of shopping carts there too. Shows you it's pretty prolific. Some people probably have been living there for quite some time.
Quite some time. And this is also one of those areas that we see a lot of water rescues, you know, when we have the flooding in this area. So we know some of these homeless encampments in this area, these have been here for a long time. They're not necessarily new, so that's why we see so much debris.
Well, and one of the stories we're dealing with today, which we'll give you a little bit later on in Eyewitness News, as we get a control of this fire, is dealing with homeless people who live in their cars. And LA City Council, they have been examining this problem. They are trying to devise some sort of rules on whether they can or cannot. So we'll try to update you on that and what they have decided when it comes to whether or not the city will let people live in their cars. And you wonder, when you look at something like this, is it safer to be in your car as opposed to being out here?
I know. Well, it's so hard because we know the LA City Council, it was a lot of people turned out for that meeting today for the vote. They did vote. They take this vote up, I think, every 6 months or so, if people can be living in their cars, vans, or RVs. And they said no, but it's very hard. Then the people who can't find a home, these are a lot of families who are living in their vans, so they don't even necessarily feel quite homeless because they have made their RVs or their vans their homes with their families, small children. It is just a very, very tough situation for families, for individuals to try to make ends meet. It's not easy, and especially now with so many people finding themselves in a homeless situation. You see right there, this is just one of those little small areas of this area in the Sepulveda Basin that have set up their sort of neighborhood.
Yeah, this is a smaller area, this homeless encampment here, which is just a couple of 100 yards from where the fire was. But imagine this, but make it much larger. That's what we just saw burn up. But you could see all the debris that is spread out throughout this, those are tires. It looks like tire treads from bicycles. When those catch fire, then they don't go out for a long, long time, and they do blow out toxic smoke. Other smaller tents right there, a number of tents over here. And you could see all of these items that are brought here, and then that was what was part of the concern when it comes to dealing with the fire that we just saw, was those trash piles begin to burn, and they're very hard to put out. If the wind was gusting, that would have been a major issue, because a tremendous amount of embers would go up into the air, and that's where you get into real issues with these fires, especially the real tragic ones that we've seen in the last couple of years, where the wind is blowing so hard, these embers get out there, and the fires move just so quickly.
Yeah, and you see people sort of trying to probably protect some of their items and trying to manage what they have out here, but we don't know if they're going to be evacuated. We know a lot of homeless people here have been evacuated. We know there have been no injuries reported, but no word on exactly how far the circumference will be without. They're holding a press conference right now. Let's let in on the update.
Probably a half dozen propane tank explosions, causing firefighters to retreat quickly and then re-engage in the firefight. At this time, we have most of the fire contained. However, we have a lot of areas that we need to go in there and sift through and sort through and do a full search. The cause is unknown at this time. What we have right now is our arson investigators are coming out, and they're going to assist us. What I can tell you, it's an extremely hazardous area because of propane tanks, potentially some illicit activity in there, some debris, and maybe other hazards and toxins that we normally wouldn't encounter in a normal riparian brush area. So during the next 7 to 12 hours or so, the fire department's going to bring in teams with special heavy equipment and bulldozers to make sure that we cut enough of the debris out, make sure we clean up enough so that we don't have any residual hazards out here. Like I say, it's extremely challenging. We've been working closely with our partners at the LAPD and the council office, because the people that were displaced also need a place. And for us as firefighters and police officers, we have a big heart, and it's like, we don't care what your condition is or why you live out here, but we're here to support and help you. So the mayor of Los Angeles has activated his homeless response team. They're going to set up basically a table here with a tent and be able to process individuals, even get the Red Cross out and work with the council office to help those displaced. At this time, we have no reports of any injuries, but we have not done a thorough search of the area that burned. And if you can imagine, if 100 people were able to evacuate, we just want to make sure that there wasn't folks left behind that weren't so fortunate. So we will be in here systematically going through the process to ensure that the fire is completely out and that there's nobody in there who may succumb to the fire. In my 30 years on the department, I've seen this portion of the basin get a little more active in terms of fires, and it's really a challenge for all of us in the community, but we're always working out here to ensure that how can we protect the community, the riparian areas of the basin, and the folks that come in here and call it their home. And it's a tough balance, but our main focus today is to ensure the fire's out and that everybody is safe.
You actually answered every question I was about to ask.
Okay.
But just for clarification, because I've been speaking with the man whose encampment caught on fire.
Yes.
He was very worried because they didn't know if people were still back there.
Sure.
Everyone has been telling me, firefighters, police officers, and all these folks who are living back here, it has gotten drastically packed back there. About 50 encampments there.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. That's not really a question for you, but like, what comment can you give us on behalf of how you all are working together to prevent it from growing even more, especially considering now people may not be able to live in their cars.
Yeah, you bet.
You know.
So I'll tell you what. While the city has a lot of these challenges, the city also has a lot of resources, a lot of agencies. We have over 52 operating departments in the city that all work under the mayor. And what we do is the mayor and the council office, we collaborate, and we have homeless task forces. I've actually served on one in Skid Row, and they're very successful. And the main thing for us to do is to make sure we identify those folks and go out there and help them. Yes, it's gotten worse over the years, but I think it's also, we've seen a lot of that across the region. I fight fires in other parts of the state, and we're not immune to the social challenges in other parts of the state and the cities. And every firefighter out there that is watching this can probably also relate that this is a challenge for us. But you know, the main thing for us is operate safely. Thankfully, we have the helicopters and those courageous pilots and the firefighting crews on the ground. But the collaboration here with the council office is working, and I've been part of those task forces. It is definitely a challenge. What I can assure you today is that we can't let anyone come back into this area because it's unsafe. Well, we're going to bring in bulldozers to make sure every piece of land is already kind of turned over, and that any equipment that's there or any hazard is taken up. This is going to be a lengthy process.
Can you talk to as well about, you were talking about how challenging it is to fight this because of you don't know what's back there, possibly illicit activity. How do you attack it differently?
Sure. So the question is, how do we attack a fire, essentially a wildland, a brush fire in the middle of the city? One disadvantage we have is that it's flat. And because it's flat, we don't have the advantage of sight. So it's extremely dangerous to fight fire in a flat terrain. Secondly, when brush reaches 4 feet in height, it is critically dangerous for us because a flame length is 4 times the height of the brush. So we know that it'll create a 16 to 20 foot flame length. The other thing is the propane tanks, the gasolines for the generators, maybe some power, maybe some other hazards and chemicals. And all those things add to the challenge, but the firefighters here are extremely well trained, and they have sophisticated equipment. And, you know, we have a warrior spirit, but a very kind heart. And that's what really makes us and this department and the LAPD unique in what they do.
And there were more than 100 firefighters initially. Have you brought in more people as well?
Yes, we brought in, the LA County Fire Department is assisting us with another 40 firefighters with hand crews. Probably within the next 30 minutes, you'll probably have well over 130 firefighters here fighting this fire. And still, the city is responding to 3,500 responses in a day. So this is just one portion of the city right now, and we have our Department Operations Center monitoring to make sure that other calls aren't going unanswered.
And the people who were evacuated from here, what's happening to them? We see some in the parking lot here.
So currently the evacuation of the folks, a lot of it was spontaneous, but we're going to want them to rally here at the sports complex. We do have probably about half a dozen or more already here that moved their vehicles out or sought shelter here. But our big thing is to go out and do a sweep, bring in the Los Angeles Housing Services Authority, the mayor's task force, and get out there and let's get everyone out of this area, because this isn't going to be the only fire out here. It's going to continue, and our main thing is let's see what we can do to get these folks in an area where we give them some shelter and protection, because it's not safe out here. And I can tell you, whether it's during the rainy season, there's swiftwater rescues because of the river areas and the flood zones, and in the summer, the brush fires. Not to mention the traffic on Balboa and Burbank, a lot of auto pedestrian accidents. It's just overall pretty complex, but those are the issues we're dealing with. All right?
Spell your name, please.
My name is Patrick Butler, Assistant Chief, Los Angeles Fire Department.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right. We're good. Thank you. I'm going to go back to the command post.
All right, you've been listening to a live press conference from the LA Fire Department. It was a really good one at that. We had some pretty good information, but right off the bat, you heard him talk about those propane tanks. We told you that was a pretty big problem from the very start. We heard that there were reports of explosions going on throughout the brush as these firefighters were trying to deal with super high flames and a fast-moving fire. They were also having to deal with these propane tanks, and as we just heard in that press conference, they were having to actually back off the fire a bit as these tanks were exploding. Air 7, right there, we have been able to scour this area and show you some of these tanks that are kind of spread out throughout that community. So see, right there, there's a tank right in the middle of your screen. These encampments, they're using these tanks to cook, and with a fire moving like this so quickly throughout this community, these tanks are then getting overheated and then exploding. It's just one extra hazard out there. And as you can see, the debris out there is proving to be even more of a hazard and tough to fight because it's fueling these fires and also creating some toxic smoke as this fire rolls through. The good news, though, things are so much better in the last hour or so. There's another propane tank right there as we continue to scour the area. These tanks are spread out throughout this area. He said they had about a half a dozen to a dozen explosions during this fire, and there are still tanks out there. I imagine each tank that we do see is an extra hazard. That car, that vehicle right there, just to the left of the middle, right there now in the middle, that vehicle also we watched explode. It was obviously filled with fuel, and as it heated up and then caught on fire, it blew up. So one of the many hazards that firefighters are having to deal with. They're bringing ground crews in right now, and these ground crews, their duty basically is to go through the debris. They're searching, most importantly, for victims, but also they're looking for hot spots and any other hazards that need to be taken care of as they get better control of this fire. The fact that that firefighter is standing in the middle of that debris is a good sign, because that is one of the hottest spots of this fire. Hello, everybody. I'm David Ono. It is now 5 o'clock in Eyewitness News, and I'm being joined by Michelle Tuzzi as we continue to go into this fire. Michelle.
Yes, we continue our breaking news coverage here on Eyewitness News at 5 o'clock. Live pictures now from Air 7 HD over this fire that has been burning in the Sepulveda Basin recreational area. This is one of the largest open spaces in the San Fernando Valley. It has been populated by multiple homeless encampments, and we're seeing one of them right now going up in flames. This has been burning since a little after 3:30 this afternoon. We have multiple firefighters on the scene. They're also fighting this fire from above. More than 100 firefighters on the scene. Numerous people have been evacuated as a result, people who have been living in these homeless encampments in this area, and they're being told by the authorities in the area to gather at the sports complex at the Sepulveda Basin recreational area. The Red Cross is mobilizing, and the city is trying its very best to get help to the people who have been displaced. their belongings going up in flames this afternoon. These homeless people who have been camping in this area in the city of Los Angeles, this large recreational area. It's unclear how the fire started, but it certainly has gotten the attention of a lot of people burning in the city of Los Angeles and putting up a lot of black smoke.
Right. They're saying this fire is only 5 acres, but don't let that fool you. It was a very tough fight. Granted, a small area, but those flames were big. And most importantly, a lot of people were living right there amongst that brush and those trees. We're estimating somewhere around 100 people are now homeless. It could be a lot more than that. We just don't know as we kind of sift through the debris and try to get a gauge. What's important here, the mayor has activated a homeless response team to come to this community to basically set up shop and start talking to some of the people that have been placed to try to get some help for them. They now have lost everything, and they had already been in a very bad state, Michelle, but now they have truly lost everything, and they need some help. They need to find a place to stay tonight.
Yeah, we're going to get more on that and more on the firefight now from Eyewitness News reporter Eileen Frere. She is on the ground in the area to bring us up to date. Eileen?
And Michelle, we're near the Balboa Sports Complex where the people who were living out here have been told to go for right now. We've seen about a half dozen in the parking lot. We took a few steps in here along the trail, which is leading into the area where the fire took place. And you can see, we were talking about the big issue here being homeless encampments, and you can see just a lot of debris here, some people's belongings, a lot of grocery carts, a lot of debris, some things that have just been charred here on the side, and you can see how far out here the fire came. We're not far from the property of the sports complex, but you can see how close it burned here. As it continues to burn here, again, the big concern, making sure that all of the homeless people that were here, and we're told there were more than 100 homeless encampments, just making sure that all of those people are out, and once they get this fire out, we were told by the assistant chief with LA Fire that they will be bringing in dozers to just go over all of the homeless encampments here. Initially, first, obviously, looking to make sure everyone is out of here, which they so far have said no injuries. They believe that everyone is out, but they want to make sure that no one was trapped. But they will be bulldozing over all of the homes that are back here. The firefighters, we've got more than 100 with LA City Fire. They are also bringing in an additional, I believe, 35 or 40 coming from LA County Fire to help out in this fight. Firefighters say that this is incredibly challenging to fight because it is flat ground. They were explaining that unlike in other fires where you might have a hilltop, at least you can look down and you can see what's going on. You can see where the fire is, what it might be burning. But here it's flat and there's a lot of debris with all the recent rain. You can see the brush and how high it is. It makes it hard to see what exactly may be within this grass. You can see, I believe we're showing one of the firefighters here on the ground hosing down some of the hot spots here. A lot of it has burned here already, but they want to make sure that they get any ambers that might be popping up, they want to make sure that they hit those and get them out to make sure that they don't spread. The homeless people who are living here, they are advising them to go to the sports complex here. The city is going to be sending out a person to help find arrangements for them, find a place to stay, and help them out with any additional things that they may need. At this point, though, again, the fire burning here, firefighters more on their way to help make sure that we get this under control and get it out. Reporting live, Eileen Frere, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Eileen, thank you. And one of the things we learned from the Assistant Chief Patrick Butler with LA City Fire as we watch this picture now, live picture of more firefighters arriving on the scene. Patrick Butler told us that this operation is going to last over the next 7 to 12 hours. Bulldozers are going to be brought in to clear this area to make sure there are no hot spots. And arson investigators will be brought in as well to look into the cause of the fire. That last shot we saw of more firefighters arriving, those may be LA County firefighters, unclear, but we are told that LA County Fire is now assisting the LA City Fire Department. This is within city limits, but because of the need. The LA County was called, and they are responding to that call for help. So we're seeing at least an additional, I think, 30 firefighters that they called in, David, from the county fire department to help them.
Right. So they started with 100 firefighters. They brought in 3 more ground crews and another helicopter as well. It was a tough fight, but they got it under control. But we, of course, will keep you posted on what they find. In the meantime, a lot of other news to get to today. So Governor Gavin Newsom, he takes direct aim at President Trump's tax returns, signing a law that could ban the president from the California primary.
The legislation requires Trump to release his tax returns in order to appear on California's primary ballot. Our Josh Haskell is live in the newsroom where he just spoke with Governor Newsom about his decision. Josh?
That's right. Michelle Newsom points out how the president has broken with modern precedent on this. The governor says in the absence of federal laws on releasing tax returns, California is just enforcing its own election laws. Although some of Donald Trump's tax returns have been released through the press, candidate nor President Trump hasn't voluntarily shown the American people his taxes. The state of California went further than anyone Tuesday when Governor Newsom signed into law a bill that requires presidential candidates on the state's primary ballot to make public 5 years of income tax